we've got a couple items here for you. First is our preliminary attendance and our student counts for October. Here's our summary count. Maybe I need to make it a little larger. Here's our summary count, and it's showing us at 358 students, a total count. There's also another about 117 students that are, I'm not quite sure, Rena, why is this number not eligible? Do you know why that is? I'm not quite sure why that additional 117, but that takes us just under 3,500 students.
Those are
Are those out-of-district students?
No.
No, the non-district schools.
Let me, hold on one second, I'll find that.
Was it
3,320.
So, yeah, so 3358 is the count that we submit to CDE, and that's up about plus 200 students from last year. So that's
significant.
that's quite a quite a large number of student increases. And then I attached some other. Here's your report per school. Again, if you go down here per school, Baker's got 294 students. Columbine, where Mr. Ng is at, 349 students. Lots of extra space over there for more kids.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, good. High school is plus 900 kids. Middle school is about 675 or 677. Let's see. Green Acres is at 335 students. The alternative high school, or Lincoln High School, at 46. Pioneer is at Rod's building, Mr. Link's building, is at 314 students. And same sort of issue as Nick, very, very full.
I thought it was interesting that the freshman class was bigger than the classes above and below it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a big class.
And you're moving.
Really?
Really?
So our district just, our district is growing again, plus 200 students for this year. I know as well. I don't know if Dr. Frasco sent out to the board members a demographics for Morgan County, but
I was going to.
or was that all Morgan County?
I'll forward you an email I just received from Dr. Eric Ishawada with updated kind of population according to census. And Dr. Hammock, that 116 that are not eligible, 110 of those are Head Start students.
But the report from Dr. Ishawada, was that for all of Morgan County or just for Fort Morgan?
Oh, I'll have to look at that email.
But his conclusion at the end was that this area is perhaps the most, he's listing it as the most diverse area or county. I'm not quite sure of his.
Yeah, he's talking about Fort Morgan specifically. And so I'll forward that to you right now.
The town.
Mhm.
The most diverse town in the state of Colorado. It is a majority minority population, 50%.
Yeah, it's new updated just figures from the census.
So quite a mission for the school district.
Mhm.
Pretty cool one.
So today's October 1st. Is this our official count day still,
program. And then we have the ABLES, the Advance, the iConnects, all those that convert down to how many of those kids actually translate to EFTE. So once we do that, then we're gonna have a better count to say our projected funding is 3130 of FTEs, and then we translate that to what that count is, throw in the halftime for kindergarten, throw in the other .08 factor percent from 50 to 58 for kindergarten funding, and then we can start to put some dollars and cents to those pupil count projections, see where that's gonna leave us on a budgetary wise.
I have a second agenda item then up there for discussion of a calendar of work sessions for the remainder of this year. And I reached out to Mr. Gherkin about potentially placing some work session dates on the calendar for the Board of Education. And again, the reason and I know, you know, the tough part about this is it puts more time onto your folks' schedule. So sorry about that. But and again, I know this is something you're probably going to want to think about at least till our next meeting in October before we make a decision on it. But my concern is our district is really facing some very difficult challenges in terms of decision making. We've got some, Mike Lee and I and the administrators have defined some pretty significant long-term buildings projects that we really require your input on. I know Dr. Fresco and I and the principals are engaged in some crucial decision making about our instructional core and about where we take the district instructional wise. We're engaged in a pretty strong project right now with a focus on aligning all of our professional development work and all of our PLC work and all of our instructional rounds work to a single problem statement for each building that's data-based. I know there's decisions on personnel force and how we look at optimizing that over the next several years. And I think all of those require significant input from the Board of Education to really do well, to make really good decisions. So I'm asking the board to consider that we add 7 work session dates to our calendar. I think it's been traditional for the board to start those, what, about 6 o'clock in the evening? 6-ish? Is that right?
We
And-
sometimes start at 5:30.
Or 5:30, have a meal for you folks, so you, probably a light meal so I don't give you indigestion with all that we're trying to do, but you never know. So that's something I'd like you to consider that we could make a decision on at our second meeting in October. And I'd like to, at those work sessions, certainly the public can attend work sessions. Student representatives can't, I'm sorry, kidding.
Did you already pick those dates, or?
Those are dates that I put out there. I looked at our calendar. We may have to. Did I make a mistake on some of those?
If you go down,
Just don't see them.
if you go down.
Oh, you go to
the
you go down to
upcoming
you go down to
meetings
the calendar. Excuse me.
Under number 7,
gotcha.
advanced planning.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
I don't know why I did it that way, but
It
it's
works.
just more fun for me to make you search around the calendar. But so I've got 7 dates, and I've got them posted up here as well. you know, and I would like to include, you know, our administrators at those meetings as necessary. Certainly, our district administrative team and you know, and gain your input to make really good decisions in all these areas. So any questions on those two items?
I just have one question on the work sessions, then do you have sort of an idea of what kind of topics you want to cover at each one, or will that just be sent out like a week or two in advance?
Yeah,
or-
I would send it out. You know, I know one of the first ones that Mike and I want to talk about is summer projects. And we've got a lot of projects, buildings and grounds projects on tap and, or on the, in our schedule. And, you know, we want to talk to you about a long-term plan on that and about long-term financing needs. And then, of course, we're all on pins and needles about what happens with this November election in terms of potential funding for our school district. And if that does come through, you know, how do we use those dollars? There's just a lot of big pieces. I would like to talk to the board about a vision for a resource officer, for an enhanced vision for a resource officer position. I've got an attachment on that this evening. Just a lot of work, a lot of work.
So on that first one, we don't show a meeting on November 12th.
So it would just be a
So it
work
would be,
session?
so just the work session, or are you gonna switch the work session to November 5th?
So these aren't on the calendar, these would all be additions.
Okay, so on the 12th, you want just a work session since we don't have a regular meeting?
Right.
Okay.
Right. None of these are on your calendars yet.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, I just thought
I
that
think
they
I'm
were all
confusing you.
prior to,
A regular
if we had a regular meeting.
No,
Not
no, they're
necessarily
all
that. Okay.
separate.
Oh, okay,
Just,
separate dates.
I just
Okay.
think the idea of trying to have a work session before a regular meeting really makes it long.
Okay, I
And
gotcha.
there's a lot of information in these work sessions.
Okay, I
So
gotcha.
I'm envisioning probably a 2.5 hour or maybe even a 3-hour work session. There's a lot to cover. And we could define that time with you folks. If that's too much, it's too much.
So if you'll ponder that, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. And any more comments for Dr. Hammock? Moving on to Dr. Frasco.
You're gonna, once we get to Ms. Hopper, we'll want to pop back to my items because they're actually her items. But just one little thing. Just wanted to let you know that Mr. Lee and Ms. Meagle and myself met with folks from Calvary University a couple weeks ago. Was that Mr. Lee? And basically the purpose for our meeting was to, now that we have an entity in Fort Morgan, to provide hopefully some educational services. So we talked about threw a lot of ideas out there about kind of growing our own special education programming, about how we could do something in collaboration with MCC, the associates, to get your teaching degree. And so really thinking about being strategic about how we utilize Calvary in the future. And so it seemed like a really good conversation, and we've been in touch since about how they're going to move forward with their programming. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Frasco. Mr. Lee.
Why, this handout is coming, I'll just give you a brief update. You may have got calls about this, but we had an issue at Baker School here a week and a half or so ago. There's a two-side component of our air conditioning at Baker, and one half of the system went down during that record 95-degree September timeframe, and that's an older Freon system that was put in when the building was originally built. That Freon system is not you can't put that Freon system in. You have to go to a new upgraded Freon conditioning system, which is theoretically less harmful to the environment. And parts and serviceability just were not available to get that done. So it looks like one of our strategies is going to be replacing that air conditioning unit. I put aside about $60,000 a year in the capital replacement budget to cover air conditioning units, to replace the whole system, including the half that currently works, but a new system probably in the range of about $100,000. So it's a pretty big ticket item, and we've limped by, and we won't do that till spring break would be more than likely when we would look to replace that conditioning unit. In the meantime, we actually went out and bought portable air conditioning that are also / heater units, and we distributed those in the Baker School. I think we'll have the opportunity to use those throughout the schools in other scenarios where there may be some temporary failure in the cooling system and or heating system. But that, that required evaluating the power needs for plug-in devices in the circuit, so we could not overload the system. But we did get portable units, and apparently that did help provide some cooling for some of those upper floors. Patients were kind of thin there for a while, but of course now we're back to a more normal type of environment, and the air conditioning has kind of gone by the wayside. But we did do that in a spirit of making our students and employees as comfortable as possible. So we'll keep you updated on what that costing process is going to look like. And coincidentally, relative to Baker, this is during your tour at the Sherman School, you might have seen that emblem on some of the trailers parked around Parkway. They're one of the subcontractors there, the electrician firm that's been doing all the wiring for the new Head Start edition at Sherman. And we're experiencing some real odd things at Baker School with the electrical system. We're having situations where the main service panel for the school keeps kicking out, causing power failures at the school. And we've had original manufacturer equipment folks here and their engineers and our normal electricians, and we've had these Parkway folks come over and start looking at the whole process. We've turned off the system. We bypassed the city power and run it off of generators just to try and continue to isolate that. And this is about 20+ years old, the service panel on that school. It's hard to imagine, hence the air conditioning problem. But it appears that we're going to have to make a change in that panel system. This got some odd things, and the oddity about this is it's concerning that we can't specifically isolate that, but has a certain element of risk factor. So we're preliminarily looking to replace out that service panel and replace that from old these big 1,300 amp round fuses that go in there to more of the traditional breaker type of panel system. There's a 280 volt sub panel and a 480 for the chillers and all the HVAC and the pump system. So we're looking to replace all of that whole system to remedy this problem. We're still trying to get that finalized, but it's about $60,000 to do that. And that would include renting a generator that if we did this theoretically over Christmas vacation, if it was nice and the weather was great, we wouldn't need that. But the problem is if we take a dip in temperature, we're gonna have to be able to provide alternate power to run the heating system so we don't have a situation where we drop below freezing, especially in exterior walls, and that could be a whole nother generation of messes. So just to kind of give you a preliminary feel for that, it appears that this is going to be our best strategy, is to bring that service panel up to more of a current electronics 2018 style of breakers and eliminate those old fuses. And the fuses can run as high as $800–900 a piece for that capacity. We're thinking there's probably going to be some energy performance enhancements there, lower utility bills because of that, but it's 60 grand that was not on the radar screen, and that's going to hurt a little bit. But I think for the safety of the building and for them to be constantly not having their power kick out with no explanation, despite multiple of people doing investigative work, it seems like the focus is narrowed down to a panel replacement. So Baker's gonna get some of your money. Any questions?
What's that new pole outside Baker? Is that unrelated to the school? There's a new.
No idea.
Okay.
So on the pricing then, it has the quote amount for the 208 service is 22,000, and the quote amount for the 480 and the 208 is 66,900, and then the credit for a bad breaker is 5,200. So we're doing all three of those?
Well, no, their pricing is kind of funky. You could replace the 208 panel and not do the 480 panel.
But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that.
That was
right?
sort of kind of our conclusion. So you could skip past the first one and say we'll go to the full 208. They're two separate panels. And the other piece of this, there's a big old giant transformer, and they may have to cut it up with a cutting torch to get it out of there. And we're coming back in with a much smaller, all-new technology transformer, because we're bringing in like 7,200 volts from the city, and then we step that down to our service power to the building. So we're going to have a new transformer brought in as well. That price is included in that. And it'll be a much smaller, take up less space kind of situation. So it'll be right at about that 60 grand, not 80. It kind of looks like there's a 20 and a 60. The 60 is kind of the all-in price.
Okay.
So kind of a couple unexpected things going on at Baker, but the air conditioning thing is a little troublesome because that phase, I think it's a R21 Freon. That's not even. You can still buy that Freon, but the systems just are not really approved for buying new systems. They're H9 or H19 or some dang thing. I don't know. Just the newer generation of less cause of the ozone because of the. You may see that in your own automobiles in the air conditioning, and constantly upgrading what that is. So that may be something that the 60,000 that I have had in there, which is just an estimate on my part, we may have to look at stepping that up possibly to address some of these ongoing replacements of units as we see the aging of our buildings.
Will replacing the half of it, will that put more stress on the old half?
That would be the whole thing. We would take out,
replace the whole thing.
we'd replace the whole thing. And we're thinking spring break is not too long out of that, then we get to spring and it starts getting warmer and school may not be out by the time it's kind of toasty, especially on the second floor. So that would kind of be our objective to do that. And we'll have to coordinate on the possibility of the breaker panel being like Christmas vacation. We're gonna check school events and other kind of things, make sure we're not gonna cause some problems there. But that breaker thing is really an issue. They're losing power, and that's pretty disruptive, and we just can't seem to get a handle on it. So
Thank you, Mike.
other than that, that's all I have to report.
Always good with
He's very close with Mike.
Okay, moving on to Mr. Boyer.
So we have 34 postings currently. Many are classified postings, TAs and coaches and the like, also subs. We're bringing in subs as we can. We did have a new nurse start today, and that makes 3 for the district, so that will be a relief for the nursing staff. Are there any questions about personnel matters that you'd like to discuss? All right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boyer. And moving on, our ELD Foundation Director.
You want it up?
We need to refer back to your attachments.
Nice. You want the poster up too?
That'd be great. Yeah, probably more so
Which
than
one
the
up
report,
first?
the poster.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure you can read that.
Let me just see.
So, Dr. Carla Esser is from Regis, and she's here to report. Last year, we went into a venture with Regis to get some of our staff some credits, and I'm going to let her tell how she created all that magic. Okay.
Good evening. It's great to be here. I come from the districts. I've been at a university for 5 years, so it's a different world. But because of that, when grants become available, I know the districts and I know who to talk to. Last year, the year before, yeah, it was last year. A rural grant became available from the state. So I called Nancy and said, Fort Morgan's rural. I think we can do this together. Nancy and I went to DU for our administrative licenses together. So that was just fortuitous. So Lake County and Morgan County worked together with Regis, and we were able to get a grant combined with Regis in-kind money and the federal Teach Grant. And 24 of your teachers got a CLD, a culturally and linguistically diverse academic certificate. So a transcripted certificate that most districts acknowledge for kids of diverse backgrounds who are learning English as a second language. And Rob was in our cohort as well. So we had a really big cohort. We got to present at the Rural Schools Consortium down at Case. And at that time, they announced another grant that would be bigger and that was coming out again, and we could write for it if we wanted to, and we wanted to. So we've gotten the second grant. Fort Morgan will remain our partner because they were our original partners. This one is a lot bigger. The former one was $60,000. This one is $125,000. It's $126,000. We asked for $125,000. We got $126,000. So we're very happy. We'll be asking teachers to participate again. It gives them the tools to work with the diverse English learners in their classrooms. We've got, as you can see from the graphs at the top, those were done by Fort Morgan teachers. And the 2 pie charts as well were done by Fort Morgan teachers. You have a very diverse population. I think it's the second largest in the state as far as percentage. So it was easy to justify why Fort Morgan. So questions?
Virtually those 24 people that took all of those 4 classes of graduate level coursework, and it cost them absolutely how much?
Zero.
$0.
But they have to agree to serve in a high needs district for 4 years. They can't get the Teach Grant until they agree to serve. So they all had to sign that. So they will now, once they complete their classes, they will have to serve in the district for 4 years. So it's a win-win for the district. You have less in the game than the teachers do. Regis puts 15% in the game, so for the districts, it's very helpful. You get no funding, so this is the way we can get teachers the type of educations they might need. So questions from the board? No? Thank you. Nancy?
So we had a meeting tonight in order to go to Aspire Round 2, and so we had staff in and getting ready to start, and if we get everybody signed up, we'll start classes again on January 14th, and those classes will run to about the 3rd week of August. So 4 sessions of 8-week classes, absolutely no cost to them but their time, and maybe $50 for one textbook, and they'll walk out with 12 graduate hours of CLD coursework, so that's pretty awesome. Okay, and you want me to go on to the other? I don't know if you do or not. If anybody has a question, yes.
Well, I just wanted to comment on this project. I think it was, when I was looking at it earlier today, I really liked what some of the people who took the classes had to say, and just how it was very helpful for them to kind of change some of their ways of thinking to be more, I don't know, it seems like it really made a big difference in how people approach.
There's a lot of positive comments from those that took it, and the beauty of it too is the instructors that are instructing for you are in the classroom and in the field, so they're really very much in tune with what's taking place at that level.
And you have some very talented young teachers that are going on to get their master's degrees. Once they complete that, they are invited to become affiliate faculty at the university, so that you have somebody in the district, so that when you need future training, it's sustainable, instead of saying, we were here, we're gone, thank you. So they should, you have a few really talented that are in the program right now.
Very exciting.
That's very exciting.
So what you have before you now is the Head Start Director Evaluation Tool. The Head Start Director's Tool was one that is very, very simple. It's a 2-page tool on a 1 to 5 scale, and really did not align with the job description of that position. And so I kind of reformatted a tool that came out of the Head Start company itself, using its rubric, and then just kind of created it to look like Randa. We worked on this, we being Marsha Bledsoe and I and Kathy Kauk, last spring, and agreed that we would go forward with this tool to use as an evaluation document for the director. We also, I think there's a second one that I put in there, and yeah, this is, and it says general aid. I sent this to you before I made that correction, but it's general aid. So they have, we're going to have 4 different evaluation tools: one for the director, one for the Head Start teacher, one for the paras, the general aides, and then it seems like I have managers. The managers, they have a health manager, education manager, disabilities manager. So I'll have 2 more that will be coming to you, but this is just for the general aid. Again, their tool was the one that we use with all of the other positions in the district, regardless of what position, and I wanted to tailor an evaluation tool for them that really specifically dealt with what they do with preschool kids. And so we came up with this tool, and again, this tool was gone over with by Marsha Bledsoe and Kathy Kauk in the spring, and so we've all had our eyes on it and are ready to implement it this year. Any questions?
I had one on the director position, just to make sure. Was it just because you were aligning it with the rubric that you needed, but it looks like there's duplication, like
Yeah.
it's like the same thing, just stated twice?
More or less. So this is the professional practice elements, and then we kind of break it out bigger into the domains as to what they are. And then it had just a general overall rubric, which aligns with, I don't know if you go up or down, but where it says basic, proficient. So the overall rubric is spelled out what those mean, and we just have to mark that particular section.
Okay.
And then what we're doing with Randa, if you're
But if
familiar.
you keep going down, it's like the same thing
Yeah,
again.
there you go.
So if you go down again, then it's like,
So these just break it out more, in more definitive, so it is kind of a repeat.
okay, I just was wondering, because it
Yeah.
looked the same to me, but I thought, well, maybe I'm just missing something.
No, you got it. Now, if you go back up a little more. So right here, so in Randa, when we do our principals and teachers, 50% of their evaluation comes from the professional practices or the things that we do in the classroom. The other 50% is based on data, student achievement. And so I kind of worked on creating the same type of format for this position. So you'll see the overall rating on the domains up there, that would equal the 50%. And then we created 3 student outcome goals. We used CLASS, which is an acronym. I can't tell you what that really stands for, but it has to do, there's like 9 different elements. And it's the tool that is used to observe preschool teachers and what they do with kiddos. And they get a rating for that that goes into their overall score. So we felt that that was very conducive to use because everybody had teeth in the game with that. And then we use Colorado Shines, which the best way for me to say that is when you go to a 4-star or a 5-star hotel, you get those stars. Colorado Shines is kind of that. So it looks at the overall program and gives a score for that. So we use that one too because, again, everybody has teeth in that game. And then the third one is self-selected, an individual type of goal that they can set for themselves. So then we combine those scores together and we come up with an overall rating for the position. And we've kind of carried that same format through when I bring in the directors, or the managers. It'll have kind of the same format to it as well. And the teachers, the classroom teachers will have that same type of format. The only one that really is a little bit different are the paras, because they don't have as many responsibilities as the teachers and the managers and the director.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the information. Moving on to discussion items, we have.
So this is policy, these are the policy updates from the last board meeting. You had a first reading in September. So I did the format a little different on these. I just put it in a single document here so you can see the policy, you can see the updates that were made. You can still go in and look at the individual policies, but I just wanted to organize this so it was more readable for the Board of Education. So here you have the non-discrimination, equal opportunity policy. You can see these were the actual changes to that policy. Transgender is a protected class. Talks about you're adding a statement on forms of harassment. And et cetera in that policy. Then you go to the exhibit. Again, you're adding the statement on transgender. You're adding a couple other piece of information on genetic information, conditions related to pregnancy. You're clarifying the compliance officer information and that's my position that I hold as superintendent. There's on the third policy, it clarifies a complaint and a compliance process. Again, you can see the additions. They're pretty small additions, but and I've just noted those throughout that policy. There was no changes to the statement on the district mission. There was one word change in that tobacco-free policy. It just was a word change from banned to prohibited. And under accreditation, it just defined elements or it deleted elements of an accreditation contract with the State Board of Education. And you saw all those changes the last time. And then if you go to, excuse me, the next item for discussion is policies for a first reading. Okay, so eventually you're gonna see, as we go through this audit piece, you're gonna see first, second, and third readings. I hope this is presented, with clarity on my part. Again, I've attached, now this is a document here on first readings. And again, here's all the changes again. The policies all the way down until, all the way through for B, BCB, BE, BEAA, and then the D sections are all off the audit that was done this summer, where you had some policies that needed to be updated. So again, I've listed your changes here. Some clarification on conflict of interest. Some clarifications on school board meetings, which again were pretty minor. I had to insert the address for the regular board meetings, the Platt Street address that wasn't in our policy. Had to define use of electronic mail as it regards rural school districts. The electronic participation in school board meeting is a new policy, so I'm adding the entire policy there. Under the federal fiscal compliance, the titles of all of our administrators, like myself and Dr. Fresco, Mr. Lee, Mr. Boyer, and their positions all had to be added to that policy. Online schools was an addition of an entire policy. There is a procedure for notifying parents of an employee's criminal charges in accordance with state law that's under a new safe schools policy. Excuse me. There is an optional notification, staff notification to the district regarding an arrest. That's an option on the part of the staff member. That's how that policy is written. There's a brand new policy on staff conduct, on drug and alcohol involvement by students, and you can see, and also on administering medication to students. There's an option 2 recommended to the board in both those policies. So if I go to, just to show the board what that looks like. I gotta find which one was that?
JACH.
Was it JAC?
And
Okay.
JLCD. The first one is drug and alcohol, the second one is
Okay,
administration
so
of
here,
medications.
thank you, Todd. So what they have here under that policy is the board has an option right up here to choose. Where did it go? I've got to open it under review. Oh, show mark. It does not show. There it goes. Huh, why isn't it showing that? Well, the statement it's not showing is that you have an option of adopting a policy that's the second option aligns that policy with state of Colorado guidelines. So so you had a choice for the district to establish particular guidelines on that policy or to align it with state of Colorado guidelines. And what I'm recommending the board is they align it with state of Colorado guidelines. And I don't know why that's not showing on there. Huh. I'll go back and find out why I'm not showing you all the markups. That doesn't make sense to me. And then to go back to our first reading here, let me pull my first reading up. Okay. And then the parent notification is new, and then the exhibit that goes with the parent notification is new. And then public conduct on district property, again, is the same option 2 here as in JICH, in JLCD, and KFA. Those are all the same options, and adding the cross-references. So, any questions about those?
I did just want to bring up the first policy that's up there, policy B, I think it's BCB, I gotta go back to it now. Conflict of interest with the board. This is one that we've talked about before. We know that there is the optional language to exclude district employees from being on the board. We made a conscious decision the last time we reviewed this to leave that to the voters and not to include that. And I didn't know if we wanted to discuss that again. I also, just from I'm not an employee of the district, but I have a contract relationship with making sure that doesn't fall into that I do work for the district there. But it was something that, as a board, we had looked at before. I didn't know if anybody had looked at that or had thoughts on that policy.
There it showed up this time. I guess I just had to click on that line there for some reason. I apologize.
So wouldn't that be on here for the last time that this was revised?
We did not. We chose not to include that the last time. We decided to not include that in the discussion we had at that time, to my recollection, it was not that long ago, it was within the last couple of years, that we decided that we didn't think that was an issue in our district, and that we thought we would leave that to the voters of our community to decide. So, anyway, I see it back on here.
So you can see
Oh,
the
it's back on.
optional language. Again, the Supreme Court has held local board has the authority to adopt a conflict of interest policy prohibiting district employment while serving on the board. And you may adopt that next statement, but again, it's optional.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think I can understand not wanting to have an employee be on the board. However, I almost feel like in Connie's situation, she's a contractor for a specific service. It's not, I don't feel like it's the same as an actual regular employee, so I don't
think it directly affects me. I think we had kind of decided that before. Michael,
Yeah.
you'd probably
But
look
I
at
don't-
that no better than.
I don't see that, I don't see your role the same as like Mr. Link's role. Mr. Link is taking care of a school and he's employed by the district and that's his main position, whereas Connie is an employee of CPMC and they
Who has a
contract. CPMC contracts with the school district, so the
Correct.
contract is with the school district and the hospital. It's not
Correct.
you personally.
Correct. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think that steps outside of what this is. But that being said, just circling around to this policy, is this something that we want to include or not?
You know, there's another statement above that, and I think this is kind of what the board, or this is what the board is doing now, and that is fine, whereby you can simply have a member of the board disclose an interest to the board on per item, and just choose not to vote on that particular item, and that's.
And we've done that.
And you've done that. You do that all the time. And that would be another way of addressing a potential conflict of interest, just have the board members self-disclose. And that way you can still maintain somebody, as you're saying, Trish, as a contracted services provider.
Mhm. From what I'm reading here, that paragraph that talks about it being a conflict of interest can be added. But it's not
It's-
saying in here that that's part of the policy.
No, that's optional. It is
Well,
optional.
We have it included in here as an addition to our policy, because our former policy did not include this, the employee. And I just want to make sure that, like I said, I recall specifically that we opted not to include that before. And
Yeah,
just wanted to-
I get updates on these policies from CASB. So as these new policies come forward, CASB sends me a
Right.
listing of about 6 or 10 policies. And so all this information I'm showing you here, you know, this comes through CASB. And then on this first reading as well, then I'm gonna take these back to our administrative team, which we did with our last group, and we're gonna talk about these policies so we fully understand them. But just how the timing falls, you're seeing these before the administrators this time.
Anyway, we have time to.
But
I
it's,
just
yeah,
wanted to
this is a
alert
first
the
reading
group
out
that
of
this
3
is-
readings. That's
that
why
this
you have those
has something
readings.
that we've discussed before.
So we should all think about it and
Just think
decide
about where you-
on the next reading if we want to have it in there or not.
Right. Let me see something here real quick, too.
That was all.
Okay, so that's the first and second readings and policies, and then discussion item C, good discussion on policy reading of JFBA, student transportation.
Derek, this is that information that you brought up, that you and I had spoken about. I just wanted to bring this, there's no action on this policy. I just wanted to bring this policy to the board's attention that, I think Mr. Ng is still here. Or no, it's not Nick's school. I think there was some concerns about students being able to attend some of our programs outside their attendance area that you and I had spoken about. And again, I just want to go back here and say, and just reassert with the board that our policy on transportation says that transportation for students granted permission to attend school outside their attendance area must be furnished by their parents unless space is available in district buses. So the point being, if we have availability, we can, we have the ability to get students to programming throughout our district. And I think there may have been a misunderstanding about that, but the way I read that policy, if we don't disrupt regular routes and we can get students throughout our district to programs, such as we have a immersion program, if we can get students to those programs, our policy says we're going to do that. And as long as we have, and if we have availability on our buses, we're going to do those. We're going to do that. And I think there may be a misunderstanding on that.
Do you feel that the Transportation Department is following this policy as it's stated? Michael,
I think I probably need to go back and reassert this with our Transportation Department, and Michael and I, Mr. Boyer and I can make sure we get that done.
I take it there was a specific
There was.
incident?
I think there was an issue with transportation, and that was language immersion, was it
Mhm.
not? Yeah.
There was a student in the ELL program, and wasn't it they wanted an accommodation to have that student taken from, was it Columbine? To the high school?
To Green Acres
Okay.
and back.
To Green Acres.
Yeah. And again, this policy says that we will do that.
And because the regular bus routes at Green Acres. And I don't believe the accommodation was made in this case. And
Yeah,
where
that's,
the
that's,
issue
that's
comes up.
that's what you and I spoke
Yeah,
about.
and, well, it wasn't made in this case, and I don't know if that was kind of a byproduct of a new transportation director coming on board. A lot of transition.
I can go into more detail if you'd like me to, but it was, it would have been like 2 additional stops. So at this particular point in time, we had a couple students that were in this program. The bus would go to the high school next, and that one of those 2 students was dropped off at the high school. So we did follow the policy and make that happen with this particular student. The next student that we declined under this policy was to eventually get to, and we're talking first grade student, was to get to Green Acres to eventually get back home. And that would have been a 3-stop if everything went well, hopefully get that kid to where they needed to be. And from a safety concern and perspective of worrying about the first grade student getting to where he needed to be, you could have subs involved, you could have weather delays, and that was too chancy, too risky. But a 1-stop to the next school, not a problem, because it's 1 stop. But you know, having 2 additional stops involved was a bit of a stretch.
Is this a policy we should look at and maybe have a reference to
You know,
the transportation
I think this
director
is
in there?
something, I think this is something where we, you know, as we have some of these specialty programs across the district where we may be transporting kids to those programs. I mean, I think this is something, again, that falls right under that time for a work session, that we have an opportunity to talk about this and look at, you know, have we thought about everything in terms of planning a comprehensive plan to address getting students into those programs and providing equal opportunities for those students. You know, we've got a pretty good sized school district now. It's, you know, approaching 3,500 kids, and I think everybody in this, well, I know everybody in this room is 100% committed to all of our students having access to the best programming they can have. We know we can't hold all programs in all of our buildings. So I do think this is something we need to, I do think we need to come back, Mr. Gerken, and talk more about making sure that we're implementing this policy as all of us, you know, as all of us believe it should be implemented. Yes, sir.
That sounds fair. Any more discussion on item C? Then moving on to action, or discussion item D, the intergovernmental agreement between the Morgan School District and the city of
I just wanted the Board of Education, and you know, we're still in the planning stages on this. Again, I've got to sit down with my administrative team. We're doing some instruction work this week. Next week, I do need to just have more of a policy and you know, management practice meeting with our administrative team. But here's for example, here's a pretty robust job description. I went to the association or School Resource Officer Association and downloaded this off their website. I think one thing that you can see in here, and I know it's something when I've just briefly talked with some of our principals about this school resource officer position, you can see that in some school districts, this job description talks about things like conducting courses and workshops here on item number 8 for staff, for students, staff, and parents to promote social awareness, relationship skills, self-management, self-awareness. Also talks about, where's this other piece I was looking at? Providing classroom presentations on crime prevention, structures of the law, teaching law-related education, de-escalation techniques. Just some of these more, there was another piece here. Just more of the proactive sorts of, again, more robust job descriptions for our school resource officer, where they could be more actively involved in leadership of conflict resolution work for our schools, I'm losing my words here a little bit, but just so we can do some more proactive work with that with the people in those positions, and so they can have more of a presence not only at our high school and our middle school, but also into our elementary school buildings. And again, what I'd like to do is have a chance just to sit down with our administrators and with the city of Fort Morgan and with the Board of Education and talk about what that position could eventually look like. And I think it would look very different than it looks now, but I think it has the potential to really be beneficial for our school district in that manner. So I just wanted to give the board kind of a look at some additional position responsibilities that I believe we could really strategize on with City of Fort Morgan and with the board. So that's all I have for that.
Thank you, Dr.
For
Hammack.
that. Thank
There's
you.
some good information in there.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot to think about with the resource officer. Moving on to the consent agenda, there's only one item on the consent agenda, the personnel action report.
Move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call?
Derek Gerken,
Aye.
Terry Lapp, aye. Trish McLean,
Aye.
Todd Schneider,
Aye.
Melissa Smits,
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to action items. Action item A, consideration to approve policies on the second reading. The policies we've previously discussed during the discussion
Move.
section of the meeting.
Move to approve the second reading of those policies.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to roll call.
Derek Gerken,
Aye.
Terry Lapp, aye. Trish McLean,
Aye.
Todd Schneider,
Aye.
Melissa Smits,
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Moving on to action item B, consideration to approve policies on the first reading.
Move to approve the first reading?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Derek Gerken,
Aye.
Terry Lapp, aye. Trish McLean,
Aye.
Todd Schneider,
Aye.
Melissa Smits,
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Action item C,
This is Mr. Link, this is about a donation from your building. Do you want to explain that? I know this, you had stated this person wants to remain anonymous. Okay.
At least the anonymity of the donor for public awareness would like to be anonymous. For the board, you know, she did explain that if you'd like to share, that would be acceptable.
Well, but if she's named in open session, it's part of the public record.
Okay.
So if she just wants to remain anonymous, you could just state what the gift is.
We've been approached by a donor that has, at this point, been willing to, or be willing to donate approximately $3,500 in funds to go for two, essentially two items. One would be the swing that you see here. It's a large child adaptive swing. As you know, the Pioneer Elementary houses our EFL program. Currently, our playground equipment is woefully inadequate in terms of being able to afford a lot of our EFL students access. So this is just one item that we could put up on the playground. I think very simple. I have had discussions with Mike Bailey in years past about this, but just getting this ball rolling. So that's one of the items. The second is really much more than just one item, but the donor is a strong advocate for literacy for elementary students, and she is willing to, well, I just cut down 50% of the population there, didn't I, with the she pronoun. But she is willing to donate a book a month for our students, every student at Pioneer Elementary. We're still working out specifics of it. Just it goes through the Scholastic Book Program, where they offer books for children for $1 to $2, and that's what she would be willing to purchase for every one of our students. As you jump up to the grades 4 and 5, I think the books jump up to about $4 and $5, but we're working through those processes. But again, just in terms of a ballpark figure, we're looking at about $3,500 donation to the school and to our students.
That's a wonderful
Do you have any
donation.
questions?
That's amazing.
Yes, very, very generous, and it's we're very gracious to accept.
Please thank the donor
Yes.
for us.
Yes. I would move that we accept the donation of these items to Pioneer Elementary School.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept this donation. Any more discussion?
Just wonderful. And just
Okay.
thanks to the donor.
Yes, thank you on that. Roll call?
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
And Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. And that concludes the action items. Moving on to
Miss-
advanced.
Okay, go ahead, Noel.
Oh, advanced planning. Our next regular meeting is
The 15th of October, I believe.
Yes.
we have
That's nice.
October 1st, but it would be
October 15th.
October 15th. And of course, then we have the upcoming meetings, which we've already discussed.
For the executive session, Mr. Gerken, Mr. Lee and I spoke, and there's no need for us to go into executive session on the safety and security issues. It's just the personnel issue.
Okay, so could we have a motion on executive session B?
Yeah, I would move that we enter executive session B, discuss personnel matters, CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses B. And I didn't read who needs to be included. Is that-
It's just me.
Okay. With the members of the Board of Education and Dr. Hammack.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call?
Derek Gerken.
Aye.
Terry Lapp. Aye. Trish McLean.
Aye.
Todd Schneider.
Aye.
Melissa Smits.
Aye.
Connie Weingarten.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We'll reconvene in executive session.
We'll break you in slow.
the same way.
Yes.
Well, do you know?